Good morning, everyone. That wasn't very good. Good morning, everyone. Okay, that's the old teacher in me, I'm sorry. But welcome to our session. I'm very excited to be here with everyone today and to talk about bridging the transition and helping prepare kids for the real world. My name's Glade Montgomery. I'm a Senior Vice President of Partnerships at Project Lead the Way. And just a little of my background, I've been with Project Lead the Way almost 10 years now. I live in the state of Indiana, but prior to coming to Project Lead the Way, I spent 29 years in public education in the state of Indiana. Started my career as a high school math teacher and coach, and went into administration and was a principal of a large urban high school and a curriculum director and ultimately a superintendent of schools. So the only thing that I ask is that you don't start adding up those years or you're going to say, man, this guy's really old. I prefer to say experienced, maybe. That's a better way to say it. But we're really excited to be here today. A lot of the sessions that I've attended here at the summit talk about the difficulties of bridging that gap between K-12 education, business and industry, preparation for the workforce, higher ed, those kind of things. So we've got a great panel here today. And you can read their full bios in your app, but I just want to introduce them very quickly, and we're going to have a great discussion. We've got, just before we do that, can I just find out maybe who's in the audience? How many people here are in K-12 education? Okay, a lot of people, very good. How many business and industry? Okay, a few. How many foundations or associations that support K-12 education? Anyone? A few? Okay. All right. Great. Well, I want to introduce our panel here, and I'm very honored to be with these people. They're going to give you a tremendous amount of information today. First of all, I want to introduce Dr. David Conley. He's the founder of EdImagine, an educational strategy consulting group, and he is also Professor Emeritus of Educational Policy in the College of Education at the University of Oregon. And next to him is Ken Ross. Ken is the Director of Communications and Public Affairs for Lockheed Martin's Aeronautical Business Area. And finally, Martha McCabe, who is the Executive Director of the KC STEM Alliance. We had a fourth panelist, Dr. Sylvia Huff, who is our Senior Vice President of Research at Project Lead the Way. She was supposed to be here, but probably similar to many of you, if you're like me, who had flight issues and flight problems. There was a mechanical issue on her plane. She was coming from Florida, and so she was unable to get here. So we're disappointed in that, but hopefully we can carry the load here with you all. So I want to start out just with some questions today for our panelists. Then I've got some follow-up questions, and we can just have a great discussion. But David, I want to start with you. And if you could think about and talk to us about what does it mean to be college and career ready, and what does your research that you've done indicate about how we can best prepare students?
Well, thanks a lot, Glade. This is a field in which I've been working really since the 1990s, and in the early 2000s developed, kind of popularized or coined the term college ready and kind of popularized that, and then added the career ready as we really kind of thought that through more completely and understood that readiness is something that applies to all students. So at a definitional level, you can think of readiness, particularly around the career side of it, as having multiple levels. And I think that makes it challenging to define, and people have different definitions in their head about what it means to be career ready. If you've ever talked to people about that, you've probably experienced some of that. You can start off kind of at the lowest level with someone who's work ready. And by work ready, it means basically you can show up for work. You're not on drugs, you can get along with other people without getting into fights. I mean, you can follow directions. There's some real basic level here of just being able to sort of retain a job. And it's not a trivial thing. I mean, a fair proportion of our population does not meet that criterion. The next level above that is job ready, and that's if you get a job or an occupation, one that doesn't lead to a career, that you have the minimal skills to undertake that job. Now, many occupations, you can be trained to do it in a number of hours, and then you don't really add skills much throughout your career. You might have new situations, but not new skills. So an occupation is different than a career. And we have to be kind of careful when we're preparing students that we don't prepare them for an occupation that's a dead end, where they don't have the opportunity to continue to learn and add new skills and progress. We want to make sure we're preparing them, at the very least, for a career pathway. And that's our third level, a career pathway. And what does it mean to be ready for a career pathway? Well, you need to have a much broader set of skills. You need to have learning skills, you need to have foundational content knowledge, and you need to have some 21st century skills. And I'm going to delve into this career-ready level in a bit more depth. So let me just put a pin in that for the moment. College-ready is the ability to be able to perform adequately in entry-level courses. And that's a fairly wide range of courses. And so college readiness entails a fairly wide range of skills, not just content knowledge, which gets the focus, but a whole series of learning skills and a series of thinking skills, cognitive strategies that it takes to deal with a wide range of different intellectually challenging subjects, and then a set of transition skills that enable you to function in a post-secondary environment. So let me just come back and, on the last level is life ready. I don't want to forget that, because sometimes we do kind of skip over that. Life ready is when you put it all together and it enables you to have a satisfying life, a satisfying career, and be a contributing member of society. So we shouldn't forget that the readiness contributes to moving on to this level of being ready for a successful and rewarding life. So I'm just going to dive into the career-ready definition just a bit more, and then I'm going to stop there, and I have a couple other things I want to come back to, hopefully a little later. But the career-ready part has three parts. Being proficient with a broad range of 21st century skills. And this won't be a surprise to you if you've been to many of the sessions at this conference. You hear people talking about these skills, give them many different names. If I get a chance, I'll go into them in a bit more detail. Although apparently all you have to do is type it into ChatGPT and it'll give it to you anyway. So that's one thing I learned about this conference is that's all you do is you type it into ChatGPT. So the second level, the second part of career readiness beyond these 21st century skills and is the career-specific prerequisite knowledge and skills. And we shouldn't overlook that. To enter a career pathways have vastly different career skill prerequisites that they require. If you think about entering the performing arts as opposed to engineering, it's a different prerequisite skill set. And we sometimes make the mistake of expecting all students to have all prerequisite skills for all career pathways. Well, that's just not realistic. So we need to be developing models that are more attuned to the career pathways for which students have interests, which means at the very least making sure that we find out what their interests are. And then the third piece of career ready is foundational academic knowledge. And we want to be clear that students need to be able to read, right? They need to be able to express themselves orally. They need to be able to listen well. They need to understand basic mathematical principles and properties and processes, and a wide variety of other content knowledge. And all of that leads to them being capable of being an ongoing learner who can add new knowledge and skills. So I'll stop there. And by the way, I do want to mention, I've got a handout that has some of this on it. I only brought like 30 copies, but if you're particularly interested afterward and you want a copy of it, let me know.
Thanks, David. Mm-hmm. You know, I think one of the things that I've experienced when we talk about workforce development, career preparation is sometimes there's this disconnect between business and industry in high school. Businesses are always saying, we have openings for jobs that we can't fill. We can't find a workforce. But trying to reach down into high schools and make those connections is oftentimes the challenge. So Ken, that's where I want to turn to you. At Lockheed Martin, you've started an internship program, and you're actually starting with high school students. So if you could talk about that a little bit and maybe why you chose to go all the way down into high school.
Thank you. And I'll start with, we've had a history of supporting education, a lot of times sending engineers out into the classroom to work with students and get them interested in the field. And in 2014, we decided, as a very conservative company, we're going to dip our toe into this high school internship opportunity. And we made a conscious decision on how we were going to do that. We looked at the curriculum the school would have, and we selected it. It had to be a school that had Project Lead the Way. It had to be a school that had an established internship program. That gave us some comfort. And then the third piece, we had to have real work for these students coming in. And we started big with 5 interns at a facility of 18,000 people. So we brought that in, and since 2014, we began growing it, and in 2018, we expanded it to another 3 school districts, and we bring in about 50 interns every year. And the goal is, when they finish their high school internship, at the end of their senior year, they go to college and pursue a STEM degree, and they come back every summer for a college internship. And before they go back for their senior year of college, they have a job offer in hand. And one of the most impressive things to me is what we learn from these students, in addition to what they learn coming in. And when we look at the success rate of this because of those 3 pillars I talked about, we have about a 67% retention rate. So from somebody who's 17 until they are out of college and in a job, and we have now probably a dozen folks who have finished that whole pathway where they're now full-time Lockheed Martin employees, but keeping them engaged and with us and along the way has been a great asset to our workforce supply chain.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to come back with an important question later, Ken. But Martha, I want to turn to you for a second. You know, that Lockheed is one company working with several school districts now, but you lead an ecosystem in Kansas City. So you're not only working with schools, but you're working with multiple businesses to make those connections. Just talk a little bit about your work in Kansas City and really what's possible when these businesses and schools work together.
Sure, thank you. And thanks for including me today in this conversation. So the Kansas City STEM Alliance started in 2011, but it was preceded by the equitable implementation of Project Lead the Way and FIRST Robotics in Kansas City across all of our districts. And to give you a frame of reference for the scale, last year we had 90,000 students in Kansas City alone in Project Lead the Way from preschool to 12th grade. For those of you not familiar with Project Lead the Way, engineering, biomed, and computer science pathways from preschool to 12th grade. And there are 42 school districts in our 6-county region. 38 of them have Project Lead the Way, plus a very large charter and private school network. So we have this really strong, large body of not only students that are looking for opportunities, but also teachers and administrators. So when the KC STEM Alliance was created in 2011 and then became a part of the National STEM Ecosystem Initiative in 2016, it really has allowed us to help companies figure out ways to get in and engage with students and teachers. Because at the end of the day, this isn't companies' core business. I mean, Lockheed Martin is busy about aerospace. And so they know it's important from a talent pipeline perspective. This work in Kansas City is a workforce development initiative, but we know it's a game changer for our students and our families. And so when we look at companies, they want to engage, they don't know where to start, and we can give them a very directed start with students who have already selected participation in Project Lead the Way, and same with teachers. And I'll give you a couple clean examples. Garmin has a whole week where they engage girls in Women in Aviation Week. And if they would throw that opportunity just out to the ether in Kansas City, we all know who would snatch up those spots to potentially fly with a female engineer. So instead, they came to a meeting at the KC STEM Alliance with all of our district administrators, and they said, hey, here's the opportunity, 2 afternoons during this week. We want to put girls in the air. Who should we select? And together, as a community, we decided that the girls who should get this opportunity are the girls who are enrolled in the high school aerospace engineering course in Project Lead the Way. And so what a great opportunity for girls at a variety of high schools, some of our most diverse high schools, some not as diverse, to have the opportunity to go up into the air and to be in coursework where they can actually leverage that experience into additional opportunities and education. What's been really fun is to watch a lot of those students now looping back. They're working. We're on 17 years of Project Lead the Way and FIRST Robotics in Kansas City. So now a lot of those young students are now employees of the companies that have been working alongside us, and they're serving as mentors. They're helping to judge projects. They're going into the classroom, and it's been really valuable.
Yeah, Martha, I want to stick with you for just a second, because it's not just about the opportunities that you provide for students, you provide opportunities for teachers too.
Absolutely. So we, because there are 3 pathways in Project Lead the Way, and Project Lead the Way does a fabulous job on their own training teachers to deliver the content in the classroom and to facilitate those learning experiences for students. But they oftentimes don't have the opportunity to understand what is the future of work in that particular pathway that they're teaching. And they don't have chances to necessarily visit with a lot of employee associates in their, in their school day. So we provide, we call them teacher mentor days. They are day-long experiences in each of those 3 pathways. We anchor them at an event, at a industry location. We bring in all of our post-secondary partners so that they understand what is the transition from high school, whether it's into an apprenticeship or other programs, but also our 2-year and 4-year universities. So it's fast track information for all of our teachers, and then also having opportunities to do mentor roundtables. And then the other thing is that oftentimes these teachers are singletons in their buildings. And so the opportunity to sit with 30 other teachers teaching your same content from around Kansas City is also a really nice sweet spot.
Yeah, great, thank you. David, I know there was some other things that you wanted to hit with regards to career preparation.
Yeah, sure. And I just wanted to emphasize that a lot of what I'm talking about is a reflection of what's built into the program that we're talking about here and into Project Lead the Way and into these internships. That you want an opportunity for students to be able to take what they learn in the classroom and not just apply the content knowledge, but develop these cognitive processing skills, these human relations skills, these other skills, people have called them 21st century skills, soft skills, many other things, but we don't really have the opportunities for students to develop them on a large scale within school. So I wouldn't think of an internship simply as a work experience. That's great. But if you think about it as a connection between what's happening in the classroom and their ability then to take those opportunities and move it out into application, I think it's much more powerful in that way. So what are some of the kinds of skills that you want to be developing in the classroom that they can then take out into the workplace? It's not going to surprise you what's on the list, but I do want to go over it because I think it's worthwhile to kind of do a self-check to say, how much of this are we doing? How many opportunities do our students have to do these things in our classrooms and in our schools? And at the top of the list is, and most lists, is problem solving, including problem formulation. Now, I include problem formulation because much of what people call problem solving is actually task completion. We give them the problem, and then we say, solve it. But we don't mean solve it. What we mean is follow the steps you've been taught to complete the problem. Problem formulation is figuring out what the problem is in the first place. And that's the kind of skill that if you can do that, and you can apply that in the workplace, you're going to have much higher value add in that workplace, and you're going to be someone who will be able to move on a career path. So thinking about problem solving as problem formulation and what opportunities students have. And it's fine if they can't formulate the problem. That's the learning experience. And at the beginning, they won't be able to because they have been, kids are socialized into learning, aren't they? They're taught how to be learners. And by the time they hit high school in particular, they expect to follow a pattern of learning in which they are told to do something and then they complete it. And when you ask them to figure out what the problem is, you will be throwing them for a loop. So you have to sort of work through the failure stage of that to where they can, in fact, come up with interesting problems, challenging problems that they really honestly don't know the solution to, and in fact, you may not know the solution to. Back to ChatGPT, it'll just solve it for them anyway. So, communication is the second one, and that includes written, listening and speaking. We don't really emphasize, I don't think, listening or speaking that much in public schools. I'm on the Technical Advisory Committee for Smarter Balanced Assessment, which is one of the national tests. And it's supposed to reflect the Common Core standards. Well, Common Core standards have a lot of listening and speaking in them. But these tests don't have that in them. We don't have ways in which we expect students to demonstrate their ability to articulate and to process. And once again, extremely important skill in the workplace is listening and not just being able to follow directions. Yeah, that's number one. But number two is be able to understand the message you're being given and what the empathy with it and the feeling tone and the implicit part of it that you're supposed to understand and then act upon. Because many young people, when they first enter the workplace, they do everything literally. They're given instructions, they follow them literally, and they produce something that is kind of nonsensical as a result because they didn't interpret. So speaking and listening is another crucial skill. I'll just add a couple more. Collaboration, not easy thing to do, particularly in a world where increasingly people don't really reach out to understand other people's points of view. So getting students who are empathetic and can understand the views of others in a collaborative context, not just to solve a problem, but to take advantage of the diversity that they might have within a group. Not easy to do. I'm asking you to reflect on the degree to which that's happening, because it does happen in the workplace to an increasing degree. Self-efficacy and self-direction, including goal setting, which is the ability to say, what do you really want to do and be and become? And how many opportunities do students have to reflect upon what they want to do, be, and become? I mean, I know we all ask kids, what do you want to be? But I mean, what real exploration goes on around doing, being, and becoming? Something like ONET, the online resource from the Department of Labor that has all the job listings and all of the different ways you can explore careers. Project Lead the Way has a tremendous number of opportunities built into the courses to think about the different options of what you want to do, be, and become. And then setting a goal on how to reach it. I think that's really important for young people, is to have goals and then set on a path to try to reach them. So I'll stop there. There's quite a few more, but these aren't unfamiliar. But I want to emphasize they're not easy, and we really need to think about the degree to which they're going on in our schools, because the degree to which students can do the kinds of things we were just talking about here, they'll fit right in with the kind of programs that Ken and Martha are talking about.
Yeah, thank you, David. And we say at Project Lead the Way all the time, kids can't be what they can't see, so it's very important to expose them to careers, have them explore careers, find out what they're good at, what they may be interested in, and it's exceedingly important to do that at an early age. Some of the work that my team does at Project Lead the Way is develop partnerships, and when we're working with business and industry, we talk about ways that they can become engaged. Businesses really want to become engaged in their communities and in their schools, but oftentimes, they don't know how. But when we talk about, lighter lift things that they can do, classroom visits, mentoring, things like that, all the way up to heavier lifts for the organization, when we start talking about work-based learning, when we start talking about internships, right away, they almost kind of, no, we can't do that with high school kids. So Ken, I want to ask you, Lockheed Martin, National Aeronautic, high security, I've been there, there's high security. When people say that they can't work with high school kids, I mean, can you work with kids under 18 and can you pay them?
Good question. That's one we get a lot. But I'd like to go back to something David said when you talked about what are the key skills that students need to have. And we hear this from our interns at the end of their high school period. They give an outbrief on what their experience was over the school year. What did they learn? Number one, the engineering process that they learned at school is real, and they had to use it. That's up there, I'd usually mention, but number two, communication. How to put together an email, how to get up and give a presentation, how to talk with colleagues. You have these 17, 18-year-old kids coming in and working with other engineers who have been at the company for 40 years, 50 years. And how do you become a mentee or a peer with that person? And so that's a huge learning curve for them that I think they really appreciate, that we have a workforce that really welcomes these kids in and makes them part of the team. And that, I think, is an important part of the learning process. Now to your question about how can you have somebody under 18? In my research, and I probably hasn't been thorough in all 50 states, but what I learned is there is no governmental law that says somebody under 18 can't work. I think it's 16, and that's not been an issue for us. The last thing I heard was people saying you can't pay interns because they're getting credit. So I did a little bit of research. I looked in Texas, in my state. I looked in California. I looked at the Department of Labor. And what I found is in Texas, the language is specifically encouraging employers to pay all interns. At the Department of Labor level, the language is such, these are the criteria you must meet if you're not going to pay an intern. So if you look at the message there, it's pay your interns. And if you are in a school district and you're hearing that from employers, let them know that that's their policy. That's nothing that you can change for them. They have to make a conscious decision that they can change their policy. It's theirs. And I think that's really important, and it's one of the things we've been trying to drive into business partners that we work with and try and encourage them to go down this path too.
Yeah. So when people say that they can't, it's really, they need to look at themselves and what they've established.
Yes, it's their policies within their own company.
Right. Now, Martha, certainly you work with a lot of companies probably that do internships and that. And this is something, as you mentioned, you've been working at for quite a while. This doesn't just happen overnight in an ecosystem. So when you think about this, what does business and education need to do to try to help bridge this gap and have kids with these experiential learning opportunities? And it doesn't just happen overnight, but how do you go about building this in an ecosystem or in an area?
Well, it's all about relationships. And, as you all raised your hand, the majority of you are educators, and oftentimes you're asking teachers, classroom teachers, to establish those relationships. That's not what they're trained to do. We have teachers in our network who say, what do you mean? You want me to email a business partner? Ugh. And so that's real. And so thinking about your internal building structure, who is the best person to maybe do that initial reach out to a business partner, and then invite them into your building, invite them to visit with to visit with the students, and talk about what it is that you're asking of the business partner, and letting them see who might possibly walk through their door. We've also had really significantly intentional conversations about who gets to have these opportunities. And I know we're spending a lot of time at this conference talking about equity and justice. And so those are real conversations that you need to have with your business partner, and talk about, I visited with one company that was looking at standing up a high school internship program, and they had 10 spots, and they were interested in gender, so they did a great job on gender equity. They had 5 boys, 5 girls, but they were all Caucasian. And so I went back to them and said, these STEM opportunities are equally provided across classrooms, but the opportunities aren't going equally. And so being really intentional that who you're bringing in matches the demographics of the city. Fast forward, we've got a company, and they just clearly said, we are only bringing in Black and Latinx students to have this opportunity, because we know the opportunities aren't equitably applied across Kansas City. Mm-hmm. And so you can't have those conversations if you don't have those relationships. And so thinking about who in your school building has that ability to create a relationship and have those opening conversations. And then the sweet sauce happens. Mm-hmm. So, it's a game changer for the business, but a huge game changer for the student.
Yeah, and Ken, you can talk a little bit about how your internship program has evolved over the years. You have really expanded the number of minority students participating in that.
We do. We have right now it's about 75% underrepresented folks, and it started out the first year we had it was 4 boys, 1 girl, all Caucasian. And since then, as we brought in other school districts, we really focused on the demographics of those school districts, and really of the area around Dallas-Fort Worth when we did that. And it's paid great dividends. When we look at the male-female ratio, it is, I think it's skewing more towards girls now than boys. Mm-hmm. And but in the other underrepresented classes, it's up there at 75%. And I'd say that represents the population makeup of our metropolitan area. So it's fair in that regards, because that's the way the community looks.
Yeah. Now, David, you've talked about the skills and abilities that are important for students. We've really kind of focused a little bit in our conversation on the high school level, but how important is it to have this systemic development of those skills all the way down into elementary school?
In some ways it's a little easier at the elementary level, because it's a little easier to do inquiry with kids. It's a little easier to do, kind of getting them to speak and to listen. And I mean, it's built in. Some of the things that we've talked about as kind of important readiness skills are actually being developed more in elementary schools, I think. And it's really an equity issue from my point of view, is to make sure that it's done equitably, that all students are having the opportunity to develop these, that we're not picking off some kids. And I'm not opposed to talent and gifted programs. That's not really my message. What I'm saying is we have to be careful not to be kind of unconsciously selecting some kids for enrichment experiences that give them more of these skills. If you think about it, an awful lot of kids, a lot of kids get summer experiences in their lives that are nothing but these kinds of 21st century skills that we talk about. It's not content. They're not learning content. They're involved in working on a ranch, or they're involved in some sort of urban experience or some sort of rural experience that gives them team building, goal setting, collaboration, problem solving. All that's happening, and that's the program. It's not a math class that they're doing in the summer. So we need to make sure that we're giving more of these opportunities. And I will put in a plug for Project Lead the Way here. I mean, this is not a commercial for Project Lead the Way, but the Gateway and the Launch and Gateway programs do that in a really effective way. I had the opportunity to analyze all the Project Lead the Way high school courses, all 19 of them, against a series of college and career readiness criteria. And not the content knowledge, but these other elements. And the courses vary a little bit in their profiles, but what's really interesting is to look and see how these other sorts of things, like something like time management, how is that being developed in a course? Or something like creativity, how's that being developed in a course? So I would encourage all of you to take a look at your curriculum and to see, you can develop your own inventory, your own way to do it. If you Google me, you'll find college and career readiness. You'll find a model I did called the 4 keys to college and career readiness, and it'll give you some nice little checklisty types of ways to take a look at a curriculum. But it's really worth thinking about at all levels, elementary, middle, and high school, the degree to which you're building in these opportunities for all students. I worry a little bit, particularly with the kind of accountability measures we had in the past, that the kids who are struggling with math and English get pulled out during the time when the creativity is going on, when the extension and enrichment is going on. And I mean, I don't have a pat answer for you. We can't neglect kids' ability to do math and reading, but keeping them engaged and for students who may be struggling academically, for them to understand that there's a future for them, that there's opportunities for them, even if they don't master every bit of mathematics. My wife happens to be dyslexic in mathematics, and she's had a wonderful career. She's found ways to deal with that and overcome it. She's had plenty of people helping and supporting her. But there are options. I'd call your attention to Advance CTE, if you're familiar with that organization, has what they call the National Career Clusters Framework, and it's 16 career clusters. Things ranging from agricultural, food and natural resources, architecture and construction, finance, health and science, human science, law, public safety, corrections and security, manufacturing, marketing, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, transportation, distribution, logistics. If you just think about some of these and think about students, if we can develop better profiles of who students are, we can help them to see where some opportunities exist for them that they might not have understood. And we don't have to always have a deficit-based model that focuses on every weakness the child has all the time. And this is where career education comes in such an important way. It can create these pathways that play to students' strengths and not always their weaknesses. So that's what I would say, the model that we want to have that extends from elementary, middle through high school is one that develops students' awareness of these opportunities, which PLTW does very well, and that then helps them to see the possibilities that exist for them to be successful.
Well, I will echo what you said about elementary students being very inquisitive. Fortunate to have 6 grandkids, the oldest of which is 9, and if you don't think young kids are inquisitive, spend about 5 minutes with a 5-year-old, because they will ask you anything and everything. They are very inquisitive. So I know we're getting close on time here. Martha, just any last thoughts, things that one maybe big takeaway you'd want our audience to have?
Well, your comment about a 5-year-old, and I think unfortunately our system kind of beats that, curiosity and inquisitiveness out of them. So how do we change that? How do we reward the questions. I think about the little tick marks on the board, and the kid who asks all the questions, gets, multiple tick marks. But, I think the opportunity to provide students opportunities, both robust opportunities in the classroom, but outside of the classroom, take advantage of what's in your city outside of the school day, and how can they be part of your solution. That's really the definition of a robust STEM ecosystem. It's in school, out of school. Those of you in the classroom shouldn't be 100% holding the bag. And who are your partners in helping provide great experiences for students? And how do you help students, as a result, build their social network? Because at the end of the day, there's some research and a report released by the DeBruce Foundation, who's one of our big partners, around employment empowerment. And it's not only understanding careers and the opportunities, but they've had opportunities to build a social network. And that's a social network of their peers that will go with them once they leave high school, but also the mentors they met along the way. And I'd encourage you to take a look at that research, because it makes significant benefits to that student from an economic perspective and an ability to be flexible as the future of work changes.
Yeah, and I think one thing to add to that, Martha, I think as you work in your communities and you get people into your classroom, you build advocates and activists for your school, for your programs that you're implementing. You can gain support through your local community. I know a lot of times they will walk out of the classroom and say, what do you need? How can I help?
Yeah.
And that's so important. Ken, a couple last thoughts?
Yeah, I'd like to focus on one thing. This is another piece of feedback we get from our high school interns. And that is, they have a certain course load at school, and when they're at their internship, they might be challenged by something. It could be coding, it could be writing, it could be something engineering related, that leads them to go back to school and reach out to their physics teacher, math teacher, whatever, and say, I need to know this. So it's garnering more curiosity, more experience. So I mean, when you talk to, I think we've all heard stories about a kid asking a math teacher, when am I ever going to use this algebra stuff again? And the teacher might say, well, after you pass the test, probably not. And that's not true. And this is an opportunity for students to understand how those tools are used in real life, whether it's work, or I heard a truck driver on a podcast the other day talking about how, if I'm going to go 1,000 miles in my truck, I need to know how much fuel I'm going to buy, because I'm going to put a bid on this cargo. How do I charge that, and how do I know what the fuel cost is? That's an algebra equation. So it's that opportunity where you bring to light the aha moment of, that's what I was learning in that class. I got to go back and get better on that, and I know who to talk to back at school for that.
Yeah. As a former math teacher, I can attest. I was asked every week, if not every day, when am I ever going to use this? So, yeah. David, last thoughts.
Well, I think really we got to break down the boundaries between school and the rest of the world. Kids are doing it in their own lives once they go out of school. I mean, they can engage in so many different types of learning activities and experiences. I mean, even things, things like Roblox or Minecraft, or, there's things they can do on their own, and they are doing on their own, to learn many of the things that we want them to be doing. So how do we break down those barriers, and how do we make sure that the courses that we're offering, the curriculum that we have, is helping them to make that connection? Not only who they are, how they learn, and what they want to be. And those are simple things to say, and yet we lose sight of them if we focus too much on one set of kind of narrow academic content knowledge, which in this day and age is useful, but there's so much more that extends out beyond it. So my challenge to you, I guess, is go back, really take a close look at the curriculum for starters, and then take a look at the structure of learning to see where the opportunities exist to branch it out and connect it out with the rest, with the world outside of the classroom.
Okay, great, thank you. We just got like less than a minute. Anybody have a burning question that they wanted to ask any of our panelists here today? Yes.
Where can we get the list, David, that you were reading from, a set of competencies?
Your handout.
Well, I've got 30 copies of the handout here, so if you want one of those, you can have it. But the list of competencies is a report I did. It's an unpublished report, unfortunately, I did for International Baccalaureate. Sorry. But I do have a copy here of it.
Any others? Any other questions? Being the session right before lunch, we won't detain you too long. We'll let you get to that. So thank you all very much for coming.
Okay.